There may be times when objects stored within an S3 bucket need to have some kind of lock placed on them, whether it's to prevent accidental deletion, maybe it's for regulatory compliance to ensure that items can be placed in a bucket but not modified after the fact. In other words, write once, read many, or WORM, WORM. We can do this in S3, but only as we create a new bucket, because that's when we can enable the object lock feature. You can't enable it on a bucket that already exists if it's currently disabled. As an example, here in the console, if I go into S3, and I'm going to go down into an existing bucket I have by the name of Budgets-East. I'll go to the Properties tab at the top, and I'll scroll down in the Properties until I come across the Object Lock property. Although notice the Edit button is unavailable. You can't enable it after the fact. You have to think about doing this while you're creating the bucket. Okay, well, let's go ahead and explore that. So I'm going to go back to my Buckets view, and I'm going to choose Create Bucket. I'm going to call this one HQ-Projects, and I'll place it in the US East region. As I scroll further down in all of the settings, there's not too much I'm going to do here other than enable versioning. Bucket versioning needs to be enabled for the S3 Object Lock feature. And that's because when you start configuring Object Lock, and we're going to talk about this shortly, but you can configure retention periods or legal holds. It would apply to individual versions of S3 objects. But I'm going to continue scrolling down because under Advanced Settings, I want to make sure that Object Lock is set to Enable. Notice it's disabled by default. And of course it says it only works in versioned buckets. Well, that's why we turned on versioning. Perfect. Going to scroll down, acknowledge that Object Lock will permanently allow objects in the bucket to be locked. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Create Bucket. Okay. So now we've got our newly created bucket by the name of HQ-Projects. Let's open that up. What I'd like to do is upload an object. So I'm going to go ahead and click Upload. I'll click Add Files. I will choose a sample file, and I'm going to go down to Properties. Now notice for Object Lock, it states that you can't specify this during upload. You can after the fact, at least not using the console. You can if you want to use the CLI or basically make S3 REST API calls. Okay, that's fine. So then in the bottom right, I'll just click Upload. So at this point, it's just a regular S3 object upload. I'll click the Close button in the upper right. So there's our object, project.a.txt. If I were to click on the link, the name of that object to open it up, under the Properties, if I scroll down, I would eventually get to the Object Lock sections where I have Object Lock Legal Hold and Object Lock Retention. So legal hold means that we can basically set data as being immutable. It can't be modified or tampered with until we turn off legal hold, or we can set a retention period, either for a fixed amount of time, so things can't be modified for 7 days, for example, or indefinitely. I'm going to go ahead under Object Lock Legal Hold and click Edit. I want to enable the legal hold option, and I'll go ahead and choose Save Changes. So now if I view the same object's properties, notice that under Object Lock Legal Hold, the option is enabled. Now the difference here with legal hold and retention is if I click Edit for the retention and enable it, we can determine if certain users with certain permissions should be able to make changes, and we can also set the retention date end point in time. But I'm not going to do that for this object. You can have both. You can have a retention period and a legal hold set for an object at the same time if you wish. Okay, so back here in the list of S3 objects in the HQ projects bucket, I'm going to go ahead and click to open up my project.txt, and I'm going to go to versions. Now remember, the object lock feature requires versioning to be enabled, and when you apply something like a retention period or what we've done, a legal hold, that applies to a specific version of an object. So if I select a version of this file, of this object, and I can look at the date and timestamps to determine if it's newer than the original, which shows up here by default at the bottom of the list. If I go to delete that, it asks if I want to permanently delete it, in which case I would have to type permanently delete and then click delete objects. It successfully deleted that, but that's fine because that's not the version on which we enabled legal hold. It was initially after it was uploaded. So if I were to try to select that initial original version based on the date and timestamp and delete it, and again, it wants me to type in permanently delete in the field at the bottom to verify this, which is a great safeguard. So I'll go ahead and do that, and I will click delete objects, except that it's now showing under failed to delete, and I have an access denied message. The reason it failed to delete is because there is a legal hold on it. So if I close out, let's click on the link for that version under properties, way down under object lock. Of course, note that legal hold is enabled. Let's click edit. Now remember, with legal hold, you can just enable and disable it at will, given that you have the correct permissions. Unlike a retention period, which is either indefinite or has a specific time frame where it can't be modified. In this case, I'll just choose Save Changes. So I've turned off the legal hold. So once again, if we go to versions and go select the original version based on the date and timestamp, which previously failed to delete, this time if I click delete, I'll step through the same motions where I have to confirm the deletion, and then I'll choose delete objects. This time it's successfully deleted. It's not showing up under failed to delete because we removed the legal hold. And that's the entire point. Legal hold is one of those things where you can specify you want something to be immutable. It can't be modified or tampered with. You have to have permissions to be able to turn it off, of course. And when you do turn it off, it can be modified or, in this case, deleted.